Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 1110 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. David.
Hello, sir.
Welcome back, my friend, to the 1110 Leadership Podcast. It's been a minute.
Yes, so good to be back. I'm noticing your warm coffee and the steam coming out of it. I don't know if it's in the frame that people can see, but
it's the most high maintenance thing about me.
It's your Ember cup.
Yeah, that I like my coffee to always be really hot and stay hot. I can't drink lukewarm.
What's your degrees on the Ember? What do you put it out on?
Oh, yeah. I max it out. I think like legally they can only make it go to 145 degrees.
Yeah, you don't want to sue Ember.
That's right.
Like McDonald's.
That was the McDonald's lawsuit probably having an impact on that. Yeah, it's doing the trick this morning.
We need to explain the Ember because not everybody knows about the Ember cup.
Like what an Ember mug is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's just it has this heating coaster that basically, I don't know what happens at the bottom of this mug. The more I talk about it, the more concerned I become that it's like doing damage to my body, but with what I'm consuming. But somehow they have a technology where it's a self-heating mug and you can set the temperature on your phone and it's just coffee at whatever temperature you want. And it's just a consistent. So no more going to the microwave every 5 minutes because your coffee forgot about it and it got cold. It's a game changer.
Yeah, that is a game changer.
Yeah.
Somebody very creative saw that need, got tired of going to the microwave.
That's right. I said, why am I wasting half my life going up and down these stairs? I'm just going to. I love it. I wish it was me. Have you ever invented anything? Or not invented anything, but had an idea that ended up getting invented?
Yeah.
You're like, I should have done something about that?
Yes.
I do too. What's yours?
The Thrive Assessment.
Oh, you actually did invent it. I mean, all right. So here's you want to hear what my Thrive Assessment is?
You mean what I thought of, but I didn't invent.
That someone else did, and you were like, shoot, I should have patented that idea. I'd be a millionaire.
Okay, sorry, go.
Do you have one?
No,
I have one.
Okay.
All right. So when I was in fourth grade, I have two. One, I'll only share one because only one actually got invented. I had a project where our fourth grade teacher was like, you have to come up with an idea for a product that doesn't exist to make the world better. And this is back in like the paper bag lunch era, right? Of bringing your lunch bag to work or to school. And I was like, what if there was a box that had containers to it that helped organize your food? So it's not all just bouncing around in your paper bag. And so I drew up a sketch for it. I presented it for a lunchbox organizer. And David, that technology is what my kids use every day to take their food to school. And I let it pass me by.
Wow.
I didn't lawyer up. I should have gotten a patent, and I don't know. Maybe I'd still be doing this podcast with you, but
that would have been long
probably
gone.
not.
No way.
So I missed my window.
You
man.
would have left me high and dry. No question about that. Sorry about that.
I would have had a bunch in my attic here, and I'd be able to give it to all your kids. It would have been it would be a very different life.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah. Anyway,
well,
I don't know how that. I don't know how.
Sorry, you're stuck with me.
I love what I asked you that you said the Thrive Assessment. Oh, that's great. That's great. You didn't take it where I thought you would, but that's okay. David's answer was, when I think of something, I actually just do it, Rob, and make it great.
I do.
Finish it.
And it's transforming people's lives, by the way.
I was in fourth grade, okay? You take it easy.
I probably have something that I did not invent that somebody did. I need some time to think through that.
Yeah, I know people have said that about like the iPhone. They claim that they had that idea of what if we all had that. I don't claim anything that transformational other than just helping to organize kids' lunches a little bit more effectively. So there you go. So for maybe a disclaimer for our listeners need to hear, they're hearing a special bonus episode. This is a in-between season one-off. We just felt compelled to have this conversation and not let too much time go by. We're continuing to record, and we're really excited for season 2 and the content that is coming your way soon. But in the meantime, we thought we just wanted to be able to meet a cultural moment and talk about that word culture and how important it is with a recent current event that happened in the world of sports. David, do you want to frame up what you saw in the news? I know you're an avid sports fan. Why are we having this conversation today, and what are we talking about?
Yeah, so we're talking about the seismic trade between the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers, where the Mavericks sent Luka Doncic to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. Luka is a generational talent. He's 25 years old. He's been All-Pro 5 times already in his career and was really the face of the Mavericks. And Nico Harrison, the GM for the Mavericks, with Rob Pelinka, the GM for the Lakers, did a quiet trade that nobody knew anything about and basically swapped these two all-NBA players mid-season, which is rarely, if ever, been done. And it sent shockwaves, particularly to the Mavericks fans who could not believe that they would trade away the future of their franchise. And Nico had a quote that we are going to talk about today that talks about culture and some of the reason why that trade was made. And it just sets up an interesting topic for us to talk about with the leaders that we engage about how you make a decision like that and how you think about the impacts of culture on your organization. So we didn't want too much time to get by. We're not certain how this is going to pan out, particularly for the Mavericks. Their fans were tremendously upset. Some were kicked out of the game that was following the trade because they were booing Nico Harrison. They've had some unfortunate injuries. Anthony Davis got injured in the first game that he played for the Mavericks, and now Kyrie Irving just tore his ACL, their other superstar. So now things are not looking good for the Mavericks. So how this will pan out will be really interesting. But in the meantime, we have this moment to talk through this culture idea, and we're excited to do that today.
Yeah, and I think what particularly made it relevant for us as we think about leadership, and there's a podcast about how we can be 11-10 leaders. Trades happen all the time, and and blockbuster trades happen like that. We've never tackled a sports highlight on our podcast before. It's really what the GM of the Mavs said specifically as to why the trade happened. And when I read this quote, I was like, this is a leadership lesson. We need to unpack this. And you've already done so on the newsletter. We can link that in the show notes. But I thought it was worth a more in-depth conversation because we talk a lot in our work about culture. So here's the framing quote that we're going to unpack today and peel back the layers of the onion here a bit. So this is Nico Harrison explaining to the media the day after the trade broke. I think it was in the middle of the night. They held a press conference, and this was his basically, here's why I did what I did and put my career on the line for this move. He said this was in response to basically, was Luka sent away because he just wasn't good for the Mavericks? And this is his response to that question. He said, I'll just say there's levels to it. Harris said of how players mesh in a team culture. And there's people that fit the culture, and there's people that come in and add to the culture. And those are two distinct things. And I believe the people that we have coming in are adding to the culture. So a couple things there before we get into this. I think it was really interesting how he chose. There's a lesson hidden right here, right off the bat, where it was a leading question to slam Luka on the way out and talk ill of him. And I think he really, I thought, did a good job kind of towing the line of really, instead of just bashing him and saying, here's how terrible he was. We don't know the real story of what happens in the locker room. But I think he really chose to focus more about this distinction that we're going to focus on in this conversation around culture fit and people who fit it and people who add to it. So David, would love to just hear your reaction to that quote. And as we dive into this, what were your thoughts when you heard that?
Yeah, I had to sit and think about it because oftentimes we engage our leaders around culture fit. Do you have the right people in the right seats, and do they fit your culture? And there's nothing wrong with that, because this quote sets up the idea that you really want people who add to your culture versus those who fit. So I had to think about that. Is that really better? Is fit less than add? And could I think of some examples in my head of what it means to add to a culture? And when you add to a culture, do you change it? And is it change for the better, or is it change for the worse? So it's an interesting question. I think what he's trying to get after, and we don't even know, he might have even thought that Luka added to the culture too, versus just fitting. We don't know exactly what he meant in his quote. But
Right.
he certainly meant that the guys coming in are going to add to it. And in his mind, it was worth taking the risk, because he thinks that adding to it is going to make their culture even that much better. And I would say that of many, I wouldn't know this, but I'm going to just project, just being a sports fan and watching the Mavericks and understanding a little bit how they operate, and historically how Mark Cuban has been such a hands-on owner that players love to play for. They already had a great culture. It was something that players wanted to go play at the Mavericks. So it wasn't like it was a bad culture. So anyway, that's a random set of ideas, but it certainly sets up this idea of being challenged with, what does it truly look like to identify people who add? And they add in such a way that's going to take your culture to another level, even when your culture is already good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the connection here to leadership of all kinds, is the inherent risk in bringing on people that are going to add to the culture, because you're moving into the unknown.
Yeah.
Right. Culture fit is more, hey, come in and be a good fit to what's already here. But what you're welcoming is disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's risk to disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Disruption could make your culture better, but disruption also could ruffle a lot of feathers, as we've seen with the Mavs fans, right?
Yep.
A lot of feathers. And so you've got to count the cost before making these kind of bold steps around culture. And I think it really, for us, we talk about culture so much because the research really validates that culture is huge in leadership. If you're not thinking about your culture, if you're not being proactive to take steps to cast vision around it, invest in it, then that's going to really be a huge problem that ultimately hinders where you want to take your team and where you want to take your company. Deloitte did a study in 2021 that found that 87% of organizations cite culture and engagement as one of their top challenges. There's a reason this is tricky, because it can feel easy to ignore. But I know, David, in our work, we have seen some amazing examples of people who have prioritized culture, people who've come in and have added to it in our work. I would love to be able to tee you up to speak to that a bit, because we've even seen Forbes 2023 found companies with strong cultures can experience up to 4 times higher revenue growth than those with weaker cultures. So this isn't also just like the floofy invest in your people thing so that you can feel good. Like, this is actually moves the needle on your revenue. So I'd love for you just to, maybe if you could share an example that comes to mind from the business world and from the folks that you've had the privilege of coming alongside in coaching, where a hire helped to transform a workplace culture for the better.
Yeah, we have one company in particular that stands out, where the ownership was at a place where they needed to hire a CEO. They had tremendous success in their company. It was time to go to another level. As a part of their culture, they're really, one of their core values is a sense of family, among other core values that are part of their company. And that sense of family is really what drove how people in their company felt valued and connected and things like that. A lot of times when you have that as a core value, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a high performing company, but this actually is also a high performing company as well. And when they hired their CEO, man, he took it to a whole nother level. I've never seen someone come in and build trust so quickly with the people that he is leading. He is one of the leaders that we would identify as someone who's so wired to be a coach, to see his role as someone who's coming alongside the people that he's leading, and to have them believe in themselves more than they've ever believed in themselves. He has, in fact, that's his mission statement. We identified that as his mission statement because that's what he's uniquely gifted at, is bringing out in people things that they didn't even know that they had inside of them. And having such a focus on investing in their people, and their revenues have skyrocketed. They are far beyond what they thought they would be at this time. They're then having to think through the next phases of leadership. We have had the privilege of coming alongside their leaders. And what's fun about this for us is another element of this leader's leadership is that so many of the people in the company are young. They're young leaders, and he's willing to coach them up. He's willing to have them make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, which is not easy for a leader to do, particularly in an industry that they're in where they need to do things by the book and treat their customers excellently. This is what we're talking about. When I had that question about fit versus add, this was the example I came to. Yes, this is adding. This particular leader is adding. And what comes with that is the inherent need to be 2 and 3 steps ahead when you think about culture. And you can take a risk in the short term or now because you've already been thinking about what you need 3, 5, 10 years from now. And you take the step to make the decision now. So go back to Nico. We don't know what he was thinking, but we have to assume that he was thinking way ahead. And leaders have to live in that space that other people don't live in. And so when they make a decision that doesn't seem to make sense, it's because people don't have the context of that forward thinking. And so you got to oftentimes take a hit because people don't know the context. And you never can bring them into your world in a way that will help them understand. You're just going to have to hope that the decision you're making is the right one, even if it is extremely unpopular.
Yeah, let's unpack that a bit more, David. I would love to hear you speak to this tension point between how much of an organization's culture is top down with the CEO or the key leader versus built and owned organically by the team. Because what you're mentioning is when you make decisions, sometimes for a leader makes a hard decision with more of the context of where they want to go than the team is aware of or is appropriate for them to know, which might make it even harder in the near term, like you're saying, TBD, whether it gets better in the long term, but the leader is envisioning that it will, really playing chess, but maybe the team only has enough information to really be playing checkers. How do you get a team to buy into culture when you have to make those tough decisions that might not go over well with your fan base, in this case, your employees?
Yeah, that's tough. I think culture starts with the leader, at least in my experience, and then ultimately is owned by the people. So it's a little bit of both and, but it starts with the leader. We see this everywhere. You can look at an organization, a company, and it takes on the personality of its leader. There's no question. Both you can see the leader's strengths and the leader's areas of growth or weaknesses, and they oftentimes mirror the strengths of the organization and where the organization needs to grow or where it has gaps. And the more the leader can put people around him or her that then takes on that culture that's driven ultimately by the leader, then it starts to get to be owned. But it's also important for the leader or leadership to create space for then people's personalities to come out in such a way that they embody the culture, but they also allow the people in their company to feel like they own the culture themselves, and they can also be themselves within the context of culture. It's really funny because I think about this related to the Mavericks, who used to have Theo Pinson on their team. And Theo was a player who we knew when he was in college because he played at University of North Carolina and was a player on the Mavericks who didn't play as much, but he was a culture guy. And I even think they had him on the team simply because of how much he built such a sense of belonging and camaraderie and fun, and guys just loving playing on the team at Dallas because of the environment that someone like him on the team created, which the leaders of that organization had to create space for someone like Theo to be all of who he was and to create the kind of cultural dynamic that was in line with what they wanted as an organization. So it's an interesting both and, while being driven from the leadership.
Yeah, you've got to have vision, and you got to be able to be excellent in communicating that vision. But I almost feel like there's this fine line here of leadership between, like you said, top down versus organically owned by the people. Ultimately, the leader wants a culture. For a culture to really work, it has to be adopted and owned and shared across the board. It can't just be from the leader. But I feel like there's this inherent tension, and I've seen this come out in my work as well, of you don't want to go too far one extreme or the other. You could basically just be dictatorial, which means, hey, it's my way or the highway, and I don't care what people are thinking.
That's right.
With no input from the people.
Yep.
But you also can go the other way, where you're like too democratic with what does everybody think we should do?
That's right. Exactly right. And there's a thread that you have to weave where it's both, but you've got to create something that people want to follow. Yes. And it's centered on core values. It's why we always come back to core values with our company and our whys, mission, vision, all that stuff. It's a vibe. You create culture is a vibe. And it's hard to place your finger on it, but when you see it, you'll say, that's it. And you can tell when you walk into a place who has it and it has a thriving culture that people want to be a part of, and who doesn't. It takes a ton of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Yep. And listening and learning, while also having personal vision and a sense of calling to what you're trying to build as the leader that you can picture, and you can picture 10 steps ahead so that you can make the decisions today that lead you to where you want to go.
Let's keep going on this. I love it. I said it was an onion earlier. This is proving to be true. All right, so let's build off the vibe comment. I love that. Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, very different vibes.
Very
right?
different vibes.
Clearly, from even just on TV, you can see it. You don't even have to be in the locker room to tell. They're just different personality types, clearly different leadership styles, just different volatility of their expressiveness.
Yeah, different backgrounds,
on the court,
right?
All of it. Yeah, all of it. Just different cultures, all of it. So in business, I'm going to throw another trolley paradox at you, David. In business, how do you handle high-performing employees who may not fit the vibe or align with company culture, but they're killing it? They're killing it for the bottom line.
Oh, wow.
The same way Luka was killing it for the Mavs.
Apparently you trade them.
You can't trade employees. That doesn't work. Only in sports can you do that. Trade coaches. This is crazy.
Yeah.
The metaphor starts to break down a bit here.
This is where you got to you have to really discern. There's a point at which a high-performing employee can be so toxic that they just have a detrimental, that even though that they are performing so well, the downside is too great. You have to let them go. And leadership is knowing where those lines cross. And it depends. There's so many factors. There's not a formula, of course. And I think that's a common experience for people to have, where they see people who are given more rein than they should. They have a hard time working with those people. Those people get off in ways that other employees might not, because they're performing so well. They're just placated. And that can really erode culture. The leader, therefore, has to be very in touch with that and create a true understanding of what's going on there. Employees can complain about that person in ways that are inappropriate. And a leader has to discern that.
Yep.
Because most leaders just want their people to get their jobs done and be high performing. And yet then there's some legitimate toxic outcomes that when people are complaining, that leader really needs to listen and pay attention and then see if those lines are crossed to let that person go.
Hey, business leaders, are you and your team truly thriving? The Thrive Assessment from 1110 Leadership is designed to help you find out. This powerful 360 tool uncovers key leadership opportunities and challenges to help foster growth and help you build a thriving workplace culture. With insights into trust, health, relationships, impact, value, and engagement, you'll gain a clear understanding of where you stand and how to improve. But what sets the Thrive Assessment apart is the relational process. It's so much more than just an online survey. Our team walks with you through the results, providing support and coaching to help you and your team thrive together. Ready to take your leadership to the next level? Visit 1110leadership.com to learn more and start thriving today. I think you're hitting the nail on the head that this is not prescriptive and it depends. I think that's honestly the shortest answer to this. But to even unpack it further, I can think of scenarios that have come up in our work where you have to really be back to the emotional intelligence. As a leader, you have to be have this humble confidence about you, where you are clear in where you're taking the organization, but you're also humble enough and discerning enough to read motive and to look past what people are saying for bias or jealousies or blind spots.
Yes.
Because I can think of a scenario where a customer is complaining about a person on someone's team, and this leader's like, what do I do with this content? And there's layers to this of like cultural difference that are at play. Of, hey, did this happen because of the cultural difference, or did it happen because this person is poor performing? That takes high discernment and back to cultural competency, which we've unpacked on previous episodes. I have found that even though it's not prescriptive in our work, Gallup does a good job of this, of identifying, breaking down the categories of, there's another way of putting culture fit versus culture add. He talks about the three different categories of employees that you have. You have engaged employees, not engaged employees, and actively disengaged employees. So they define engaged as highly involved and enthusiastic about the work, psychological, quote unquote, owners, driving high performance and innovation and helping move the organization forward. Everybody wants that, right? That's the primo. And when you have it, like those are the first ring employees. Second ring, those are people who add to the culture. Second ring would be not engaged. So these are the kind of the quiet quitters, right? Like they're here, they're maybe the culture fit in some way, like they're doing their work, but they're not engaged psychologically. They're unattached to their work. And because their engagement needs are not really being fully met, they're putting in the time, but not necessarily the energy and passion into their work. So that would be the second ring people. And then the third ring people, what you're talking about, where it can get toxic, is those actively disengaged people who they aren't just unhappy at work, they're resentful that their needs aren't being met, and they're acting out on that unhappiness. Like, so every day they're potentially undermining what their engaged coworkers are trying to accomplish and to the vision of the organization. And so I found that those rings, I had one of our clients put this really beautifully. It's like, Rob, I don't need just people in the boat. I need people rowing with me where we want to go. And I thought that was an awesome distinction, right? There are people who are actively rowing with you towards your vision. There are people who are in the boat that aren't rowing. And there are people that might be rowing in the opposite direction that are slowing you down, which I thought was just a really helpful way to categorize this conversation.
They got buckets and they're putting water in the boat so the boat will sink.
Saboteurs. That's right. That's right. Oh, man. So kind of as a segue to this, we talk about how this is inherently risky to invest in adding to culture and adding people who will help to disrupt and innovate to take your culture where you know it needs to go as a leader. So let's talk about change management for a bit. According to research, change initiatives fail 70% of the time due to a lack of leadership support and poor communication. Yikes. That's a pretty, that's not, that we're not batting all that well when it comes to change management. So you think about the Mavericks trade, teams often do need to reset in sports world, just as the Mavericks and Lakers are going to need to be in rebuilding mode, so to speak, as they integrate both these new players into their cultures. So David, thinking about that from a business perspective, would you recommend as some key strategies for helping businesses navigate these big culture shifts after leadership changes or restructuring of a team?
That's a really good question. This is the key, right? Like it's one thing to make the decision. It's another thing to manage the decision and the repercussions and the aftermath of it. This is where the real leadership muscles have to be flexed. And I think, we're just projecting ourselves into the situation of this particular trade, but if you're Nico Harrison, and if that trade with Rob Pelinka really was just between the two of them and the others didn't know, and we don't know that for sure, but let's just say that for example's sake, then his need to communicate and even over communicate with all of the people involved going forward is critical. For him to connect with Jason Kidd, who's the coach of the Mavericks, to connect with the other leadership that's on his team, to have him explain what he can explain around the details, the why, how this is moving forward, what all this entails. And that assumes that he's done a lot of work ahead of time for them to trust him.
Mm-hmm.
So there's work ahead of all this that has to be in place in order for you to pull off that kind of decision, because you know that you have the trust of your team around you, even if you have to make a decision without their input, so that when the implementation of this happens, they trust you. They might not have known. They might have questioned whether they should have been involved with it or not. But ultimately, they have to trust you as the leader. And so hopefully that has happened. And then you just over-communicate. You got to over-communicate with all of your stakeholders, the team, the leadership, in his case, the fan base. Try to figure out what your message is in the media, all those kinds of things, to help people understand what's going behind the scenes, the why, and how they highlight core values, the ultimate direction of the company, and how vital everyone is on the team for reaching the vision or the goals that he has in mind for this.
Mm. So, David, 1 in 5 employees have left a job due to a toxic work culture. So some teams fall apart, right, due to toxic culture, like we're talking about here today with the NBA, even with great talent. We can think about probably many examples of, man, why didn't they do what they should have done? They were built for a championship, and it just didn't. It didn't work. So what are some early warning signs that a company culture is heading in the wrong direction, and how can leaders correct that?
I think when there is a toxic culture, if you've been a part of one, some of the things just tiptoeing around the office. It's like everybody's walking on pins and needles.
It's tense. It's a tense environment.
It's tense. You just feel it. It's thick in the air. People just come to work, put their head down. They do the minimum. You don't see any of that rowing that you talked about. We're just in the boat, not taking ownership. There are quiet conversations that are happening that people can see, but people can't hear. Leadership is having meetings in a separate room, and you don't know what they're talking about, and they feel a certain way when they come out of those meetings, and you look at their facial expressions and you wonder, oh no, who's going to be let go next? Certain people have more influence than they should. It just feels like there are people who have more power or voice. Of course, you see lack of performance and people not being safe to be honest. So all those things are the things that are related to toxic work culture. It's really challenging then for leaders who probably were the main cause of that work culture then to reverse that. And reversing that takes time, and it takes steps that re-engage trust. It's pretty simple it's all about trust. Not exclusively, but mostly that. So what are things that you can do to build trust? You listen, you ask questions, you create safe places for people to be honest without threat of losing their job. You try to not play favorites. You have boundaries and you still are not placating, like we talked about earlier, just having a complete democracy where anything goes. You're open and vulnerable with what's behind what you're doing as a leader, maybe some areas of growth that you need to have. And then you're very forward thinking and giving people a vision and a clear direction of where this is going. Because a lot of times people don't feel connected because they're just wandering aimlessly. They feel like they don't know where this is headed in general and what they're contributing to. And therefore, they don't know where they're headed personally. And so if you don't give them the picture of what where an organization is going and how they fit into that, then it's really difficult for you to regain that thriving culture with them.
Yeah, I think the trust component in this is huge. And specifically when you unpack this idea of kind of what Patrick Lencioni refers to as the vulnerability-based trust.
Yep.
Because so much of this, to your point, is about communication. But if we're not careful, those separate meetings, we can be so protective of what people know and be putting spin. Like, people know, but don't treat them like they're dumb. Mm-hmm. They know when things aren't going well. Don't try to spin everything like it's all positive. Like, that's what we want to do when negative things are happening. I would say share what you can and be as vulnerable as you can, and it is appropriate to be honest about the situation so that you're not just trying to put a positive spin on a really tough situation. Treat people like grown-ups, and when possible, be vulnerable with them. Share failure openly with your team when you can. Put them in positions to teach you, celebrate their superiority, and take the pressure off yourself of always having to have every perfect answer, and that we're a culture that always wins, because that's not true. No culture always wins. Mm-hmm. There are going to be losses. And if you try and spin the losses as wins, you're going to break the trust of your people. Mm-hmm. And it's going to have the opposite effect of what you're intending. So, David, we're both Tar Heels here. We've seen games in the Dean Dome. We know that winning teams are judged by championships and banners that you hang. Tar Heels have a lot of them. How should businesses measure whether their workplace culture is truly thriving? Because a lot of this you're talking about it's hard, it's vague, you got to have discernment. Is there a way to measure culture? And really, how do you know for sure whether you have a thriving culture?
Funny you ask, Rob.
Lunchbox organizer. Is that what you were going to say?
No, I was going to say the Thrive assessment. What we invented.
Your invention is more appropriate.
We actually invented. Now, I will just say that you need to have something that has what you're measuring. Like, you got to measure the things that are indicators that people are thriving, which is why we created the Thrive assessment. That the qualities that we're measuring in that Thrive assessment, we know lead to a thriving culture and thriving leaders and thriving companies. So it's really helpful to have a tool like that. If you don't have a tool, you need to think through, okay, what are the things that we need to measure to ensure that people are thriving? And then what's the mechanism that we're going to use to do that? And typically that's thinking beyond just numbers, beyond just normal kind of metrics and goals that are typical in a company, and coming up with people-centered outcomes that we can measure over time that allow us to understand those trends. And that's why we love doing the Thrive assessment, because it helps us do that. It's a ready-made tool for that. But also it's something we can do over time, and we can compare scores over time of leaders from year to see the areas in which they're growing. And it's quite helpful to get after a measurement related to a thriving culture.
Yeah. I mean, every culture needs a framework to ensure that culture is really thriving in a holistic way. And that's what Thrive is. Really, it's a framework. One component of it is this assessment that really helps you to look in the mirror and take a 360 holistic look, a pulse check of your culture, which is, we've just seen it time and time again, be a transforming tool. We'll link more information to that in the show notes for people who are interested in learning more about whether if they're in positions of leadership or are interested in taking that assessment or having us come alongside you and your culture to be able to offer those insights. So David, take us to the bottom line.
Yeah, as I think about this big idea of culture fit versus culture add and being challenged to identify people who add to our culture, that inherently means that I need as a leader to think about hiring people who are different than me and creating an environment where there's many different ideas and backgrounds and perspectives that are part of our leadership, all centered on our common goal and the culture that we want to create, knowing that not having leadership that lives in an echo chamber where we're all the same and we're all always doing the same things is going to lead to our success. McKinsey said companies with diverse leadership teams are 36% more likely to outperform their peers. So a lot of this is being cutting edge with how we think about building our teams and making sure that we have skill sets, perspectives, backgrounds, expertise that come from a variety of different places and perspectives that are united around a common theme and a common goal, building a culture that's vibrant so that we can achieve far more than we could have expected if we hadn't taken the risk of hiring people that may be different from us. And that takes a leader who knows how to do that, who can bring together people who have different perspectives and backgrounds around a common theme that can move us toward high performance. And that's what it means to be world class. And I think that's what the challenge is from this quote and what made me think about it again for myself and pushing our leaders to think about that in order for them to thrive.
We've given our listeners a lot to sit with here with this special bonus episode and look forward to resuming for season 2 coming your way soon. Thanks for your time, David.
Thanks, Rob.
To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.